A flight attendant forces an elderly black man off the plane. But then, he makes a single phone call, and the entire flight gets grounded. The old man stood quietly in the boarding line, waiting patiently. His fedora perched neatly on his head, a simple brown suitcase dangling from one hand. He was dressed in a beautifully tailored gray suit, one that whispered of decades filled with quiet dignity, not flashy wealth. There was a grace about him, an ease. But the second he moved forward to hand over his ticket and board the plane, the air shifted. Not loudly, not with a fight, no. But in a way that was almost worse. A coldness, sharp and chilling, that made the hair on your arms stand up. The kind of cold that makes you second-guess yourself, even when you know you've done absolutely nothing wrong. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step aside," the flight attendant said briskly, almost snapping the words like twigs. Her voice, dark, her eyes, narrowed with a kind of judgment that needed no explanation. Passengers glanced over, some curious, others clearly annoyed at the delay. The man blinked, slow and confused. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice even, calm, controlled like a man who had learned long ago that dignity was his best weapon. "You're not in first class," she snapped, voice dripping with disdain. Without a hint of anger, the man slid his hand into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out his boarding pass. "Actually, I am," he said, offering it with a gentle hand, almost too polite. She barely looked at it, a quick, dismissive glance, then scoffed. "You must have gotten it by mistake. I'm going to need you to step off the plane while we sort this out," she declared. The aisle fell into an uneasy hush. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, some looking away, others pretending to scroll on their phones. The man, now clearly disappointed but still dignified, looked from his ticket to the attendant and back. "Miss, this is my assigned seat," he said, voice still even, still giving her a chance. "Sir," she hissed, lowering her voice so it wouldn't carry, but not lowering the disdain wrapped around each word. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." Moments later, security was called. Still no one spoke up. No one said a word. Not one. The old man, suitcase still in hand, dignity still intact, found himself back in the terminal, watching through the wide glass windows as the plane he should have been on began to taxi away without him. But oh, the story. It didn't end there. Not even close. He sat slowly down on a nearby bench, the exhaustion of the moment pressing heavy on his shoulders. With a sigh, he pulled out his phone, an older model, a little scuffed but well cared for, and scrolled through his contacts. He paused for just a second, then tapped one name. The line rang once, twice. And then a voice picked up. "Hey, Uncle James. Everything all right?" James looked out the window, voice steady but carrying a heavy kind of sadness. "They just threw me off the plane, Marcus," he said simply, no drama, just a tired truth. "They said I didn't belong in first class." There was a long pause. Dangerous one. The kind that tells you something big is about to happen. "Which airline?" the voice asked, no longer casual, tone hardening like steel. James told him. Simple, direct. "Stay right there," Marcus said, voice clipped. "I'm handling it." And the call ended just like that. What that flight attendant hadn't realized, what no one around James had bothered to even wonder, was that James Patterson wasn't just some elderly man. He was a retired Tuskegee airman, a decorated war hero, a pioneer who had broken barriers before most people even dared to dream. He was also the former CEO of a multi-billion-dollar aerospace engineering firm. And Marcus Patterson, the nephew he had just called. Yeah, he was the chairman of the board for the very airline that had just humiliated his uncle. And Marcus, he didn't take family matters lightly. Within 15 minutes, air traffic control received a special communication. Flight 882. Authorization to depart is pulled. Plane must remain on ground pending executive directive. Inside the plane, the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been instructed to return to the gate. There's been an unexpected directive from HQ. Please remain seated." The passengers shifted in confusion. Whispers filled the air. The flight attendant, the very same one who had thrown James off, her face drained of color as the captain approached her, handed her a folded note, and said nothing. Whatever she read on that paper turned her expression from smug to sheer panic. Meanwhile, outside in the terminal, James sat quietly on his bench, watching the scene unfold through the glass. No flicker of revenge, no pride. Just patience. Because a man like him, he had seen far worse. He had fought battles bigger than this. And yet, it still stung that after all this time, some lessons hadn't yet been learned. A young black woman who had witnessed everything, hesitantly approached. Her eyes were full of something, guilt, sadness, maybe both. "I saw what they did to you," she said softly, almost in a whisper. I wanted to say I'm sorry. That wasn't right." James smiled, warm and kind despite everything. "Thank you," he said. "But I don't need apologies. I just need people to do better." Moments later, 2 airline officials practically sprinted into the terminal, looking panicked and breathless. "Mr. Patterson," one called, rushing up to him. "We deeply, deeply regret the misunderstanding. Your seat is still waiting for you. We'd be honored if you'd reboard with us." James stood up slowly, adjusting his fedora with graceful precision. "And what about the flight attendant?" he asked, calm but firm. "She's been removed from duty, sir. We'll be conducting a full investigation," one of the reps stammered out. James nodded once, curt and final. "Good," he said. "Let's make sure this doesn't happen to the next person." As he walked back down the jet bridge, passengers looked up, some with guilt burning on their faces, others with quiet, awestruck admiration. A man who had said nothing earlier stood up suddenly, offering his seat with trembling hands. James smiled gently. "No thank you," he said, voice strong. "I'll take the seat I was given. I earned it." And with that, James Patterson sat back down, in first class, exactly where he belonged. The incident, it made headlines across the country within hours. It wasn't just a man being thrown off a flight that caught the world's attention. No, it was what the entire moment revealed so clearly. That sometimes, no matter your age, no matter your towering list of achievements, no matter how much quiet dignity you carry in your step, the world will still, somehow, try to define you, judge you simply by the color of your skin. But James Patterson, oh, he reminded them all of something they forgot. Power doesn't always scream. It doesn't have to shove or rage. Sometimes it simply picks up the phone. Quiet and unstoppable. By the next morning, headlines were blazing. The airline, scrambling to repair the damage, announced a sweeping overhaul of their sensitivity and diversity training protocols. Big promises were made. Changes were pledged. Boardrooms filled. New policies drafted. It looked dramatic on paper. But James, he didn't gloat. He didn't schedule interviews or sit under spotlights. He didn't rage online or fan the media flames. No, he just went home the same way he always did. He watered his plants, humming a little under his breath. He folded his jacket neatly over a chair. And he sat at the kitchen table, reading the morning newspaper with a steaming cup of coffee beside him, like he did every day. Because for James Patterson, it had never ever been about revenge. It was about something far bigger, something slower, harder, but infinitely more important. Change. Real lasting change. And maybe, just maybe, this time, that change had finally taken off. As the flight finally resumed that day, something had shifted. Something heavy, something unseen. The air itself felt different. The light chatter between passengers was no longer carefree. It was thick with something more. Guilt. Awareness. A realization that they had all just been a part of something ugly. They hadn't just witnessed a misunderstanding. They had sat quietly while a man was humiliated, right in front of them. And none of them, not one, had spoken up. Guilt draped over the cabin like a heavy, suffocating fog. James leaned back into his seat. Not because he was trying to relax, no. but because his back still ached. Those old injuries from wars fought decades ago still reminding him of the price he'd paid for the freedoms so many took for granted. He stared quietly out the window, watching the clouds drift by like slow-moving ghosts. And he fell into a silence that wasn't peaceful. It was a silence built from endurance. The silence of a man who knew, deeply, painfully, that respect, you had to fight for it. Sometimes loudly, sometimes silently, always at a cost. He thought about his late wife, Evelyn. Oh, Evelyn! He could hear her voice even now, teasing him, laughing that soft, beautiful laugh, telling him he was always too gentle for this harsh world. If she'd been there, she would have been furious. Furious for him. For all of it. "You're not invisible, James," she used to say. "Even when they try to make you feel like you are." He smiled at the memory, a small, sad but grateful smile. He missed her more in that moment than he had in a long, long time. Just then a young flight attendant, not the one who had thrown him off, no, a different one, approached carefully, nervously. She couldn't have been older than 22, James thought. Her eyes were heavy, weighed down with more than just a long shift. They were weighed down with guilt. "Mr. Patterson," she said softly, voice barely above a whisper. I wanted to say I'm sorry." James looked up at her, reading everything she didn't say. "I wasn't the one who..." She started, faltering. "I know," James interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. "But you work here. You saw it happen. You all did." She swallowed hard, tears brimming in her eyes. "I've got a little brother," she said, almost breaking. "He's 15. And he's already so angry at the world. I'm scared he's going to grow up thinking this is normal." James paused, letting the weight of her words hang in the air. He saw the fear in her. But he also saw something else. Hope. A desperate, aching hope that maybe, somehow, this could be different. "Then make sure he knows it's not," James said, voice steady. "Change doesn't start in grand speeches or big news articles. Start small. In small places. With small choices. Don't wait until you're older to stand up. Speak now." She nodded, wiping her eyes quickly with the back of her hand. "Thank you," she whispered, voice cracking. Hours later, when the plane touched down, James remained seated even as the seatbelt signs blinked off. He wasn't slow, though age had made his bones ache and his movements heavier. No, he stayed seated because he wanted to feel the moment. He wanted them to feel it too. To sit. To think. To remember. In the terminal, the buzz of media was already thick. Cameras flashed. Reporters whispered and prepped. Someone had uploaded a video, that young woman from earlier. And it had already gone viral, racking up millions of views before the wheels had even touched down. Title was simple. Brutal. Truthful. They threw him off the plane. Then he made one call. Marcus, James' nephew, was waiting near the exit, pushing through the gathering crowd. His face was set, serious. Scanning. Searching until his eyes found his uncle's familiar figure. "You all right?" Marcus asked, gripping James' shoulder firmly. His eyes searched James' face for signs of weariness or defeat. James smiled, tired but unbroken. "I'm fine," he said, voice quiet but sure. "I've been through worse." And somehow everyone around them knew. He had.